this is a long game. It's not about having an AI generated headline or email or ad copy and pushing it out there and thinking you've solved world hunger. It really is also about thinking about what does marketing mean in the future? What is the role of human beings in the marketing function versus the AI co-pilots? Thinking about what kinds of skills and experiences will be needed, what type of org design, what type of relationship you want to have with your customer in this world where it'll become very difficult to know if you're talking to a human being or to an avatar.
Today, we're having a conversation with Shiv Singh. Shiv is a hands-on marketing professional working for some of the largest corporations in the world, like PepsiCo, Visa, Expedia, and LendingTree. He's also the author of several books, the most recent being Marketing with AI, which is part of the Dummies series of books. Let's get into it with Shiv.
So Shiv, great to see you.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you've had an amazing career at so many different areas of digital. And of course, you were at it at the beginning of it all. So you saw so much of this where we were fighting for 5% of the budget to where we are today, where it's pretty much all of the budget. What motivated you to pursue your career in marketing, and what continues to drive your passion for this field?
Yeah, no, great question. So, when I think back on my career and where I was, in the late 90s, finishing my undergraduate degree, I had majored in information systems, minored in creative writing, and had written fiction for my honors thesis. And I wanted to pursue a career that would bring the best of those different worlds to life. Not to sound like a cliche, but the art and science together. And I also wanted to earn a good living and be able to provide for a future family that I would have. And that quickly took me into the world of marketing. And I was thrilled by what was happening with the internet. It was the early days of the internet, to the point where, we talk about people as Swifties. I don't know if there was something then that, like an internet-y, but for me, the internet, I know I'm embarrassing myself, but I saw the potential. I was incredibly excited about it. To this day, I still remember where I was the moment Netscape IPO'd, if you remember Netscape, the original web browser. So it was bringing those two worlds together that took me in the direction of marketing, because I always wanted to be at the heart of digital transformation that was happening, but through the lens of use and consumers and behavior, where I would be able to use my words as well.
Indeed. And then, so since then, you've become somewhat prolific over the years in writing books, kind of like the Harlan Coben of the marketing world, right? So your first book was Social Media for Dummies, right? And for all the good that social media did in terms of connecting us and providing an amazing platform for brands and for individuals and for creators, it also brought a whole lot of other stuff. So now that we're 15 years away from your first book, what would you include today if you had to write that book all over again?
I'll be a little blunt. I have a lot of guilt about the social media era. That book I wrote, Social Media Marketing for the Dummies series, it did incredibly well. 5 editions, 8 or 9 language translations. Just last week, I got a royalty check from the Turkish edition of all things. So the book did extremely well, but I have guilt because through the book, through the public speaking I would do, through the roles I had at the brands that I worked for, I was a massive advocate for everything social media and social media marketing. And what I did not see, I was such a techno optimist, is how it can be served and weaponized to harm our democracy, to corrode democracies around the world, and perpetuate biases and inequalities in ways that I had never thought was possible or could have imagined. Even as we fast forward to the 2024 election, I'm deeply worried that this is going to be the election of disinformation. And a lot of that will be fueled and channeled through social media. So with that as a backdrop, I would say I would still write the book again, because I do believe in the incredible powers of social media and in the marketing and the business world. But it would be a far more cautious book with far more emphasis on how it can be weaponized as a force of ill as much as a force of good.
Yeah, indeed. I think we all saw the potential, right? But we were the techno optimists. We were all connected. We were all excited about being able to reestablish relationships, right, with people that we had in high school or junior high school from around the world. And it all kind of took us by surprise. So the concern now as we go into this era of technology, this era of AI, is will this be the election of generative AI, and how will that impact and disinform and confuse people to a point where it has a tremendous outcome, especially here in the United States as we come up into our new presidential election.
Yeah, I think about the 2024 presidential election as it's going to be the disinformation election. And I say that because we're already seeing signs of how AI can be used to create synthetic data and deep fakes that can then be pushed through social or in other forms of media and really play with our minds. And a great example, Donovan, I brought up Taylor Swift. Just this morning, I don't know if you saw this, but a deep fake, so basically something mimicking and acting as if it was her, endorsed a product online, which she was not driving. That product wasn't even driving it, but it was a third party that found a way to gather consumer information by using her likeness and using her voice, all artificially created. So, we're only in January. We know the election is going to be contentious. We know that there are different worldviews on whether the election can even be fair or not. And for a lot of people, it's a break or make moment. So yes, unfortunately, Gen AI and the other AI tools at our disposal will tragically, I believe, be used against democracy. And it's going to be on each of us individually to do our own little bit to fight it where we can.
Correct. I agree with you all the way on that one. So now let's jump into your second book. So talk to me about your second book. Your second book was called Savvy: Navigating Fake Companies, Fake Leaders, and Fake News in the Post-Trust Era. Right? It was a mouthful, I remember that. So talk to us about that. Like, how did you move from the Dummies social media book to this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So in some respects, this book was my apology tour for the social media era. It was a mea culpa in many respects, because by this time I had seen the incredible potential of social media, but had also started to worry about the risks. This was after the 2016 election. By this time, we saw that there had been a Russian influence. We had gotten familiar with the idea of echo chambers in the social platforms where, extreme points of views would just sort of play around and be nurtured and feed on themselves. So going back to 2018, we saw the difficult sides to social media. I was sitting at my dining table one day, sitting across from my wife. We were having a glass of wine, and we started to think about the world that our generation was leaving for our children. And it struck us that in many respects, we were leaving the world worse off than the way we had inherited it or were inheriting it from our parents. And that's what led to the idea of this book, Savvy, that we wanted to do a tiny little bit in our own way to And you're welcome to roll your eyes if this sounds trite, but in a tiny little way to help make a positive difference in the world. So at the heart of the book Savvy is this idea that there's crazy bad stuff that's happening in the world tied to technology. Of course, really good things as well, but crazy bad stuff. It's going to be hard to fight it. It's not like regulation or the tech companies can resolve these issues, because there'll always be bad actors. And with technology, the power of those bad actors just magnifies, that gets on scale, and they're able to weaponize in bigger ways. So the only way to protect ourselves, the only way is for us as individuals to develop shields so that we can fight, whether it's deep fakes or misinformation or cybersecurity threats or whatever it may be. So the book Savvy, I co-authored with my wife, who's a clinical psychologist, and it's all about understanding what we call these human glitches, why we fall for that deep fake or that piece of misinformation, and then how we can wire ourselves or inculcate ourselves so that we can protect ourselves from being affected and influenced by them in the future. So it's probably one of the few books out there where the author is blaming the reader for not doing enough to protect himself or herself, but then is providing advice and guidance on how to.
That's good. So we're going to come back to the advice and guidance around that piece in a bit, because that was a very, very important book. So I came across a Forbes post where you wrote, said, "We celebrate journalists like guardians because we want to believe the war on truth is their problem to fix. But in doing that, we absolve ourselves of our own responsibilities." Right? So when I read that, what stood out to me was that there was a lot of responsibilities that we had to absorb, and in some instances, absolve ourselves from during the era of social media. Now, as we enter in this new era of artificial intelligence, there's a whole nother level of reassessment of our values that we have to take in and around our responsibilities and as individuals and as business leaders. So what do you think the responsibilities are, and how do we build accountability this time around?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So firstly, when I think about journalists and the responsibilities there, I feel it's important for us to be mindful of the fact that in many regards, we all are journalists today, because we all have our own channels. We're all building our personal brands. Through the social platforms, we all reach people, and we have to do our own part to be responsible in the media that we put out there, whether it's created by ourselves or whether we're resharing something else. And I think it begins with that. And, you know, in simple terms, one could say that we need to have a much greater level of media literacy than ever before. But it goes beyond that as well. We need to be mindful of the content we're reading, the content that we're sharing, the conversations that we are part of, the role models we are to others by virtue, not just in our physical world and in our families and with our kids and their friends, but also online when people are seeing what we say and how we say it, or when we are silent. So given that we're in a highly fragmented media ecosystem now, where every individual is their own tiny but very important media property, we have to behave the way those journalists would carry that responsibility of the truth so seriously. Because now it's not just in their hands, it's in all of our hands. So that's when it comes to media in general. To your second question about what does it mean in the artificial intelligence era, Donovan, I have to say the stakes are so much higher. This is not just another next evolution of digital. You know, I hear some folks say, well, we had the web-based internet, we had Web 2.0, we had mobile, we had social, now we have AI. We've all been through this movie. it's rinse and repeat. I don't believe that's the case at all. Based on the research I've been doing and my own thinking, I strongly believe this is equivalent to the fourth industrial revolution. And if we think about those industrial revolutions, they happened over a 500-year period. Both the possibilities of what we're able to do with AI and now with Gen AI and LLMs laid on top of it, we're quickly reaching a point where it is what I consider technology meeting our imagination, where we're only limited by imaginations. And in the cases when we are limited, then the technology can tell us what to imagine on top of that. So that's one piece to it. The other piece to it is we're reaching a point where these AI engines, whatever form they take, can help us in incredible ways, be our co-pilots in the workplace, in our personal lives. But in the wrong hands or with the wrong motives or the wrong value systems, they can do incredible damage to us individually and to society as a whole. So at the risk of maybe worrying you and your listeners a little bit, I think the stakes couldn't be higher, both in the professional world and in our personal lives. And it's on us to really understand how we can contain some of the downsides so that we get the benefits of this time. There's no going back to it, but we retain the humanity, and what makes us as human beings a species better than every other that has come before or exists around us, with that love and intellect and care, because yes, it can be put at risk.
So let's jump back into some marketing stuff. So coming from the world of finance and fintech, what do you see as some of the opportunities for those companies to apply AI to build relationships with customers as well as to provide operational efficiencies?
Yeah, so on a day-to-day basis, I think there are huge opportunities. And I was just earlier this morning talking to two fellow CMOs in the fintech space, large organizations. The first area where we've always and already have seen a lot of benefits, and I'd see this first time when I was at Visa, is in, and this might be the more boring side, but it is in fraud detection, where you're looking at transactions happening around the world, and on the Visa payment network, there'll be 40,000 transactions a second happening. To identify fraud and manage risks, AI would do an incredible job in identifying, predicting what is likely to happen and contain it. So that's in a broad business sense. In the world of marketing specifically, an example that I'm super excited about is we might finally get to that place that we as marketers have talked about for a long time, which is personalization at scale. The who, where, what, right time, right place, right message communication. And that can happen because the amount of data or signals rather that an AI engine can process in real time, and then based on that processing in real time as well, create highly personalized messages, whether that's then pushed out through email or in a social channel or over a phone call because it's a customer rep using it, is incredible. So all of a sudden, when I next have a conversation with my bank, they will not only know so much more about me, they will know how to talk to me so that they're getting the outcomes that they're desiring, and I'm feeling that I'm being taken care of. And that alone is such a massive, massive opportunity.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity to build that relationship with the customer at the initial point of contact, right? So you'll be able to provide them with financial products, whether it's for a new loan for their home or for repairs or for the next stage of life with their children and education. And then previously we just didn't have that. right? But now we're at that point where we can be able to provide that, and on top of it, provide, customized products. So not just in the financial services realm, but everywhere.
Without a doubt. And you know what's interesting about this also is if you think about the financial services world, especially on the consumer banking, lending side, it used to be a high-touch, one-on-one interaction. My dad was a career banker, and he'd tell me that, they'd have their branch and people would walk into the branch and spend time with their bank manager. And it would be a very important relationship. Over the last 15, 20 years, with technology, we've created a gap in that relationship. It's become automated and anonymous and impersonal. With AI, when used effectively and in the right way, it can bridge that anonymous gap and become much more personal once again.
Right. So now you've entered into this era of artificial intelligence by writing your newest book, which is another dummy series, right? So this is marketing with AI. So once again, you're on the cutting edge of all of this. What are you telling folks this time around?
So, well, I'm certainly telling them some of what I've just shared with you already.
Right.
That when it comes to AI, there's incredible opportunity, but then incredible risks. And you've got to look at, as business and marketing leaders, you have to look at both sides of the equation. So that's one piece. The second is I'm sharing that this is a long game. It's not about, having an AI generated headline or email or ad copy and pushing it out there and thinking you've solved world hunger. It really is also about thinking about what does marketing mean in the future? What is the role of human beings in the marketing function versus the AI co-pilots? Thinking about what kinds of skills and experiences will be needed, what type of org design, what type of relationship you want to have with your customer in this world where it'll become very difficult to know if you're talking to a human being or to an avatar. Now, I know I'm talking to you and I know you're a real human being, but if we were doing this video podcast or videocast in 2 years' time, I would need some kind of marker to make sure that I'm talking to the real Donovan and that you aren't multitasking and doing 5 of these interviews at one time and I'm not getting the real you. So that's an example of some of the topics that I cover in the book. I also talk about the ethical implications, policies and procedures, the potential to reinvent how creative and insights is done, how media planning and buying is changing, and how brand takes on a very different shape in the future. And I would argue a much more important role than even today.
Indeed. And, and what I'd love to start hearing more of, right? I spent the last several years of my career working in the tech for good space, right? So I'd love to figure out how we're going to bring more of those conversations. How do we center more of the applications around technology, especially around AI as we move further into it, around doing amazing things for society, right? Doing the right thing for people that are in vulnerable situations and vulnerable populations, especially as we are in this era where it seems like we have the largest refugee and displaced people in the world, right? So I'd love for us to get to that place at some point as we start to have more conversations around the future of technology.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And it's something else I talk about in the book, which is that we have opportunities thanks to AI that we've never had. And not just in the world of marketing, but in society more broadly. For example, AI is being used to identify cures for certain types of cancers. It's being used to craft drugs that will have all kinds of implications for society and very good ones. It's going to be on us to steer, firstly to make sure that we continue to have control over it, but then to steer it in the direction where it develops and furthers society as well. And to your point, is a force for good in society versus it being a big tech company play or a capitalism play. I mean, nothing wrong with those, but them in isolation is not enough.
Exactly. So tell me more about your journey in the marketing industry and experiences that really shaped your career. Like, what were some of the moments that put you in a position where they were just, the seminal moments that shaped you and the trajectory that we all know today?
For me, I would say there have been a few key moments or few key themes, and everything is clearer in hindsight, I would say. The first is I've been massively motivated to learn. I'd get a intellectual kick out of learning something new. And in the marketing world, with so much changing every few years, being somebody who cared to learn and put a lot of effort into learning, it served me well. A great example is, and this is where things have unintended consequences. Back in 2005, I met my future wife. We started dating. She was doing her postdoc studies, in the Boston area. I was working at the time. And I woke up one day and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm massively underqualified relative to her because I had a bachelor's degree and I was doing this whole internet agency thing. And so, at dinner that night, I said, I've got to go back to school. And she was a little taken aback by it, but she was like, fine, do you know what you're going to study? And I was like, I'm actually not quite sure as yet, but give me a week. I just know I need to develop myself and round out my education. A week later, I came back and said, I want to study social networking theory. And I was able to get myself admitted into the London School of Economics and Political Science. So 2 weeks later, at another dinner, I said, there's good news and bad news. The good news is I know what I want to study, and I know where I need to study it. The bad news is it's across the pond, and that's not a reflection on what I think about our relationship. Now, fortunately, she was pretty mad at me for a bit, but she stayed through it, and the rest is history. So we're happily married with 2 kids. But that moment is what led me to study social network theory, which then led me to write my first book, which then led me to join PepsiCo because they wanted to bring in someone at a more senior level who understood social media marketing because it was new and important. And that led me meeting other amazing leaders, or rather meeting amazing leaders at PepsiCo that allowed me to really expand my horizons, that brought me to the West Coast at Visa. It just had all kinds of downstream effects. So that's one piece. That was like one key moment. Another moment I'd say is I was at Visa and I was launching this program. It was a startup program and it was all about bringing outside innovation thinking into Visa. And for the first couple of months, I was like, my peers ran the North America marketing team and they just weren't biting it. I was on the global side. I was like, this is why we should do this. It's gonna, open up Visa to the startup community. It'll create interest in our developer network, all of those pieces. They just weren't biting and weren't interested. And then one day I suddenly got a call from the Australia country manager who said, and it was a woman a little older than me. And she said, I've heard through the grapevine that you're trying to launch this program. Have you considered piloting it in Australia? We'd love it if you'd consider us as one of your markets. Now, until that point, there was no market in the world. I was about to shut the thing down before it had even started. And I was like, I think Australia is the perfect market. And I was going to reach out to you because you Aussies, I flattered her in a few different ways. And the next day I was on a plane to Australia. We launched the program there. It is now in 60 countries, 5,000 startups have been through the program. it's run by someone I handed off to who's doing an incredible job of it. It's a huge thing for Visa, even to this day. Had that Aussie business leader not called me, it would never have gotten this far. And that's just that random someone taking a chance or understanding the vision and going together. So that's just another example. I mean, there are few like these that have made a huge difference in my life and sort of drafted the narrative of my story, so to speak.
That's great. So would you consider your vision and your fortitude and perseverance part of like your character strengths?
So Donovan, I think that's a really perceptive of you. Yeah, what I've learned is grit and perseverance. It's we don't get enough training in it, and it's underappreciated. And in fact, without a doubt, it's after a certain point, it's less about intellect, it's less about communication skills, it's less about specific technical skills, whether it's in the marketing realm. It's whether you can stay the course and have the grit and with that have the humility. I mean, that business leader was 2 levels junior to me, but I knew if I did that with her, it would create FOMO in all the other countries that Visa operates and momentum would build. So that's what I try to teach my kids, in fact, that grit and perseverance is so massively important.
Indeed. So when you look at all the what we've seen in our time, we've seen amazing products come to market, we've seen amazing products leave the market. Who is your favorite marketer, and what attracts you to them, and what makes you look up to them?
I'd say that's a hard question because there are a lot of incredible marketers out there doing incredible work. Mm-hmm. But 2 that come to mind, and it's really more first person experience. So when I was at PepsiCo, the person who brought me in and who I reported to, incredible marketer Frank Cooper. He's now coincidentally the CMO at Visa after I left Visa. But he brought a particular creative brilliance to the table that was married with a very strong legal mind, because he was trained he was a Harvard Law School grad. But he understood culture the way few other people did. And that's because he was in the music space before coming to PepsiCo. So what everyone would talk about in theory, he knew how to bring that to life. He knew whether it was music culture or sports culture or street culture or sneakers, whatever it may be, he had his finger on the pulse and could do incredible things with that insights. I'm going to give you 3 names. The second, also at PepsiCo, was one of the presidents at the time, Brad Jakeman. And what he taught me was, and it was really more by observing firsthand, is the power of creativity, but tied to that is having taste. And it's so important to have good taste, because that's how you can create brands that stand the test of time, that separate themselves from the pack. What was also particularly interesting about that is when I think about that learning today, what is going to separate us from the AI agents or AI running around doing our jobs is taste. AI does not have good taste. It has terrible taste. And they don't understand, and it doesn't understand culture well. And that's something else I'm trying to teach my kids, taste. And the final thing is, when I was at Visa, I had the privilege of reporting to the Visa CMO at the time, and to Antonio Lucio, and another incredible leader. And, with the way he would drive the marketing function, I learned how one can strike the balance of being a servant leader, but still being able to lead from the front and with deep passion and deep care. So I've had the privilege of, I think, working and learning from some incredible leaders.
Absolutely. And I think I saw just this weekend, Antonio returned to HP as CMO, right? Yeah. So a lot of going back home. So that's great. And so what advice would you give to someone who is just starting out their career in marketing based on your experiences and lessons learned?
I would say a few things. Firstly, when you finish university and you're entering the workforce, don't think you're done with your education. If anything, it's the opposite. You need to start studying even more, though unfortunately you'll have less time to do so. Any good fortune I've had, it's because I've focused on learning and constantly learning, and I think that's super important. The second thing I would say is lead with not just empathy, that's talked about a lot, and I think that is true, but with integrity and a strong value system. And the sooner we have a great awareness of all our social responsibilities and can lead and participate and come to the table with values that aren't just about our own careers, but about our role in society, the better off we will be. And then the third thing I would say is we're all very lucky because there's no shortage of incredible people that we can learn from. And it's more on us to make sure that, we're listening twice as much as we're talking and allowing ourselves to learn from others that have come before or others that have different experiences. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a hierarchy, age, mentor-mentee relationship, but the corporate world is incredibly complex and incredibly difficult at times. I have my battle scars that changed me, as does, I'm sure, everyone else. You can't do it alone, even though we may think we can when we're young. We have to open up, be vulnerable, and be willing to learn and recognize that for however much we know, there's 10, 50 times amount of insight and knowledge and wisdom that we do not know and we'll never get to, and we have to depend on each other.
How do you see the future of marketing evolving, and what are the key skills or areas of expertise that you believe will be most valuable for marketers in the coming years?
So there's good news and there's bad news. And I'll start with the bad news. I think marketing is going to evolve dramatically, and to be blunt or not to waste words, I think the marketing industry is going to be smaller in the future, even in just 5 years' time or 3 years' time, than it is today. Just this morning, Google announced another round of layoffs, as did Instagram. Citibank announced that they're going to cut 10% of their workforce over the next 2 years. That was another announcement from this morning. Gen AI and AI more broadly has incredible opportunities for us, but it's hard to fight the hard, painful reality that it's going to take fewer people to do the jobs that we've been doing. So one is there are going to be fewer jobs to do. The second thing I'll say when I think about marketing in the future is we have to focus on what makes us as human beings unique. And that's taste, that's emotion, that's empathy, that's, knowing how to call audibles when they should be called, how to, zag when everyone is zigging, and develop the strategic insight and the strategic foresight as differentiators. Because when we develop those skills, as long as we're marketing to human beings, there'll always be exciting, interesting jobs for us with those types of skills. The third piece is, all of a sudden, we have to think through the lens of the world's population has doubled or tripled. And we need to know how to work and partner with these AI co-pilots and these AI tools. And the more deeply we know them, where they work well, where they can go off the rails or off the reservation, the better off we will be equipped to do our own jobs and to get the best out of them. That's the third piece. And finally, I think we're in an age where we have to pay even more attention to our own roles in society, regardless of whether you're at the start or the end of your career or somewhere in the messy middle. And that is having a social consciousness, to your point, thinking about tech for good. We have to be sensitive to inequalities in the workplace and in society. We have to, for once and for all, do more to solve whether it's gender or ethnic or race-driven bias in the workplace, because life is hard and it's getting more and more complicated and harder. The folks that will stand out are the ones that have the hard skills to do their jobs, the ones that know how to co-pilot with all these AI things running around us. It's going to be like that in the future. And the ones that come to the table with a strong value system. So when I think about the future and what's needed, those are some of the thoughts that come to mind.
So Shiv, thank you so much for this. It's been great reconnecting. Really grateful for the time and looking forward to seeing you sometime soon in person.
Yes, thank you so much. This was super fun.